It was a quiet afternoon in a Chipotle restaurant when something extraordinary happened, something no one there would forget. Elon Musk, the billionaire inventor and entrepreneur known for shaping the future, was sitting in the corner booth, enjoying a rare moment of calm. Dressed casually, he blended into the crowd, but his presence carried an undeniable energy. Nearby, an elderly woman, frail but with a spark in her eyes, watched him intently. She seemed out of place, her hands trembling as she clutched a small, worn notebook. After a moment's hesitation, she approached him, her steps deliberate but unsteady. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath as she leaned in close, whispering something only Elon could hear. His expression shifted from curiosity to deep emotion as her words sank in. Suddenly, the man who had launched rockets and revolutionized industries was wiping tears from his eyes. What could she have said to bring one of the world's most powerful men to such a vulnerable state? Was it a message from his past, a plea for help, or something far more profound? Stay tuned as we unravel this incredible, heart-stirring encounter that reminds us all of the power of human connection. Elon Musk had always been a man of few words in public, preferring to let his achievements speak for themselves. Whether it was launching SpaceX rockets into orbit, making electric cars a household name, or envisioning a future on Mars, he had become a symbol of innovation and success. Yet in that small Chipotle, surrounded by the hum of everyday life, he appeared to be someone completely different, vulnerable, human, and affected by something deeper than business or technology. The elderly woman, though, was a mystery. Her appearance seemed so ordinary, dressed in a faded cardigan, and with thick glasses perched on her nose. But there was something undeniably striking about the way she carried herself, as if she had seen a lifetime's worth of stories unfold and was now carrying the weight of them in her eyes. Curious whispers filled the restaurant as others watched the strange interaction unfold, some trying to piece together what had happened, while others simply watched in silence. What had she said? What could possibly have moved Elon Musk, a man who seemed impervious to emotion, to such a degree? As they exchanged a few more words, the air in the room thickened with anticipation, as if everyone could sense that this was no ordinary encounter. It was a moment that could change everything. As the woman finished whispering to Elon, the atmosphere in the Chipotle shifted. People began to murmur amongst themselves, speculating about the exchange. Some patrons stared in disbelief, others glanced at each other, unsure whether they were witnessing something extraordinary or just another odd moment. Yet no one dared interrupt. It was as if a silent understanding had passed between them all. This was something too personal, too significant to intrude upon. Elon remained seated, his hands trembling slightly as he wiped away a tear, his gaze locked onto the woman. She didn't seem rushed or alarmed by the emotional shift in the room. Instead, she stood there, almost expectant, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. There was something in her demeanor that hinted at years of experience, perhaps wisdom gained from a lifetime of observing the world unravel in ways both beautiful and heartbreaking. Behind the facade of wealth and success, Elon Musk had always struggled with the weight of his choices. The relentless pressure to innovate, the burden of his vision for the future, it was isolating. Few understood the sacrifices he had made, the moments of doubt that plagued even the most driven minds. Was this woman offering him something he had been searching for all along? A glimpse of understanding, or was it something far more profound? In the corner of the restaurant, another pair of eyes watched the scene unfold with growing concern. A young man, dressed in a simple hoodie and jeans, had noticed the interaction from the moment it began. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this encounter than met the eye. As the woman slowly turned to leave, the young man stood up, his curiosity piqued. What had she said to Elon Musk? He needed to know. His instincts told him that this moment would change everything, and he wasn't about to let it slip by without getting closer to the truth. The elderly woman's footsteps echoed softly as she made her way toward the door, leaving the restaurant in almost complete silence. Elon Musk sat frozen, still staring after her as if her words had left an indelible mark on his soul. It was as if time had stopped, the hum of the restaurant, the click of silverware, all fading into the background. He didn't move. He didn't speak. The young man, now standing near the counter, watched with wide eyes. He had been trying to piece together the fragments of what he'd just witnessed, but the more he thought about it, the more confused he became. Was this some kind of elaborate stunt, or was there something deeper at play? His instincts told him that the answer was far more complex than a simple exchange of words. The way Elon Musk had reacted, so raw, so vulnerable, made him question everything he thought he knew about the tech mogul. Driven by an overwhelming sense of curiosity, the young man made a split-second decision. He had to follow her. As he slipped out of the door behind the woman, the chill of the evening air hit him like a wave, but he barely noticed it. He was focused on one thing: finding out what she had said to Elon. Meanwhile, back inside, Elon slowly rose from his seat, his hands still shaking. He pulled out his phone, scrolling through messages, but his mind wasn't there. It wasn't in any of the usual places he'd retreat to when troubled. He was lost in thought, as if the world around him had suddenly collapsed into something unrecognizable. Something had shifted in him, and it felt like there was no going back. The elderly woman, now walking down the quiet street, seemed oblivious to the young man trailing behind her. She was moving at a steady pace, as though she knew exactly where she was going, and why. Every step she took felt deliberate, purposeful. It was clear she wasn't afraid to confront whatever lay ahead. As the young man followed, his heart raced. What if he was making a mistake? What if he was just chasing after shadows? But the pull to understand the truth, to understand why this moment was so significant, was stronger than any doubt. He had to know. And as the woman disappeared into the night, the final piece of the puzzle seemed closer than ever. But just as he quickened his pace to catch up, something unexpected happened. Something that would turn everything he thought he knew upside down. As the young man rounded the corner, expecting to catch up with the elderly woman, he froze. There in the shadows, he spotted something that sent a chill through his spine. She wasn't alone. A tall figure stood beside her, barely visible in the dim light of the street lamp. The figure's face was obscured by a hood, but the imposing silhouette was unmistakable. The young man's heart skipped a beat. Who were they? What was going on? He instinctively stepped back, trying to keep his distance, but the woman turned slightly, as if sensing his presence. For a brief moment, their eyes met. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her gaze that unnerved him, almost as if she was fully aware of his every move. And it wasn't fear in her eyes, but something far more calculating. The young man felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Was she leading him into something? Or had he stumbled into something much darker than he could have imagined? Before he could react, the hooded figure spoke, their voice low and menacing. "You've been following us." The words weren't a question. They were a statement, one that sent a wave of panic through the young man's chest. He had no idea who this person was, but it was clear now that he was far deeper in this mystery than he had ever intended. Meanwhile, inside the Chipotle, Elon Musk was still sitting, his phone now forgotten in his hand. He kept replaying the woman's words in his mind. It wasn't just what she had said, it was how she had said it. There was a quiet intensity in her voice that felt like it carried a weight he couldn't shake. And now something else gnawed at him. He wasn't sure if he wanted to face what he was feeling, or if he could. He had spent his entire life focused on changing the world, revolutionizing technology, and even building the future of humanity. But this conversation, this moment, felt different. It was as if the universe was telling him that there were parts of himself he had neglected, parts that, until now, he hadn't been willing to confront. But what had she really meant by her words? And why had it hit him so hard? Outside, the young man was growing desperate. "Who are you?" he demanded, trying to steady his breath. But the hooded figure's response was chilling. "The real question is, who is she?" With those words, the tension in the air thickened. It was becoming clear that this wasn't just about Elon Musk anymore. There was something bigger at play, something that neither the young man nor Elon himself had anticipated. The hooded figure took a step closer to the young man, his presence menacing in the dim light. But before the situation could escalate any further, the elderly woman raised a hand, halting him. She turned to the young man, her gaze softening, as though she finally recognized the fear in his eyes. "He's not your enemy," she said, her voice now gentler, almost reassuring. The young man was confused, but something in her tone made him hesitate. "Who are you?" he asked again, his voice trembling with a mixture of curiosity and caution. She glanced at the hooded figure, then back at him. "I'm someone who's seen enough to know when the world needs saving, and when it's already too late," she answered cryptically. "But I've come to make sure that doesn't happen again. Not if I can help it." It was then that the hooded figure stepped forward, pulling back his hood. To the young man's shock, it was none other than Elon Musk. But he wasn't the confident mogul the world knew. His eyes were filled with sorrow, and his face looked older, burdened. The woman turned to Elon, her voice firm now. "You've made your choices, Elon. Now it's time to face them." The young man stood frozen, trying to comprehend what was happening. This man, the man who had shaped the future, was standing here in the middle of the street, broken. Elon took a deep breath and finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've tried to build a future where humanity thrives, but I've ignored the one thing that matters most: the people. I pushed everything aside, convinced that technology could fix us. But it wasn't enough." The elderly woman nodded solemnly. "And now you're paying the price." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the distance, a car's tires screeching to a halt. The young man turned, his pulse racing. A black sedan had skidded to a stop right in front of them. The door opened, and out stepped a familiar face, one the young man had never expected to see. It was the woman's daughter, but not just any daughter. She was carrying something, a small device, glowing faintly, tucked tightly in her hands. "Is it time?" the woman asked her, her voice steady, yet laced with fear. The daughter nodded. "It's ready." The young man's heart raced, his mind spinning. What was going on? What was this device? And how did it fit into all of this? As the daughter approached Elon, she handed him the device. He stared at it for a moment, a look of terror flashing across his face. The woman, standing beside him, placed a hand on his shoulder. "You can't run anymore," she said quietly. Then, without warning, the device began to hum, sending a sharp pulse of energy through the air. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting. The young man instinctively stepped back, his pulse racing. And then, in an instant, everything went dark. The young man woke up to silence. No cars, no bustling streets, just an overwhelming stillness. As he looked around, his breath caught in his throat. The world had changed. The city was gone. The sky was a deep shade of purple, and the air was filled with an eerie calm. He turned, searching for the others, but they were nowhere to be found. In the distance, a figure appeared. It was Elon. But this time, he wasn't alone. The elderly woman was by his side, her face now calm, almost peaceful. "Where are we?" the young man asked, his voice shaking. Elon looked at him with a haunted expression. "We're where it all begins." The truth hit him like a wave. The device, the conversation, the choices. It wasn't just about technology or saving humanity. It was about something far more fundamental. And now, in this strange, new world, the young man realized the full weight of what had just transpired. The game had changed, but whether it was for better or worse, only time would tell. And in the stillness of the transformed world, the final twist lingered. They weren't alone. Not anymore. As Elon and the elderly woman walked toward him, the young man felt a wave of realization wash over him. This wasn't just a moment in time, it was a turning point. The device had done more than shift reality. It had peeled back the layers of their lives, forcing them to confront the very essence of who they were. In this new world, there were no distractions, no technology to shield them from their deepest fears. Only the raw truth remained. Elon looked at the young man, his eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "You're not here by accident. You were meant to see this, to understand what we've done, and what we must now do." His voice was steady, but the weight of his words carried a gravity the young man had never imagined. The elderly woman smiled, her face softening. "Change doesn't come easy, but it's the only way forward. We can't fix what's broken by pretending it doesn't exist." The young man nodded slowly, absorbing the enormity of their journey. This wasn't just about one person's legacy or a single invention. It was about redemption, about learning from the past to shape a better future. As the three of them stood together, the horizon began to glow with the first light of dawn. The world, though uncertain, now held a glimmer of hope. They had changed everything, but the real challenge was yet to come. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: the journey had only just begun.